Gary, thank you for joining. And please let me know, how do we pronounce your last name?
It's Schwebach.
Schwebach. I see.
Just the way it's spelled.
I see. And you're a professor of practice at IUPUI?
I'm a professor of practice and director of the BioHealth Informatics Research Center at the IU School of Informatics and Computing, Indianapolis, which is a fancy way of saying I'm at IUPUI.
Fair enough. But I've been curious, what is a professor of practice?
So the Indiana University has a program where they take people with experience in particular areas and bring them in primarily for teaching, but also for, in my particular case, making contacts with the community for the community being able to access some of the resources that we have to offer. And that's internships with students who are learning informatics. I'm in particular in the health and bioscience area, but also research opportunities. One of the things we do is help with commercialization of faculty and doctoral student intellectual property, to take those into commercial ventures, as well as speaking opportunities, getting to know the community. What we try to do is bring people together from different types of business and different not-for-profits to kind of get to know each other and understand what's going on in the community. There are 3 professors of practice at our school, and I'm privileged to be one of them.
And I imagine that when a university brings in someone as a professor of practice, they're also bringing in your network, your experience in industry, your different, perhaps not necessarily exclusively academic perspective on problem solving. So let's go back a bit and see where you started, what your educational background was, and why that led to an interesting, I won't say career, but an interesting set of careers, maybe on top of each other or even at the same time.
So long time ago, which sounds like an old rock song, I was a young person in Southern California, and was thinking of going to medical school. Went into a program at a local university, University of California, Riverside, that was a 8-year program. You did 4 years, and then you went and finished medical school. About 2 years into that, I took a class in Chinese history, and I said, "Oh, this is pretty cool." So, being 19, 20 years old, not thinking things through entirely, I switched into a dual major in political science and Chinese. Ended up going over to Hong Kong because we couldn't go to China for my junior year. Became fluent in Chinese.
No way.
Yeah. So when you graduate, what are your different options? Well, I ended up going into the Navy as an officer, and that was okay. But I always had an entrepreneurial bent. So when I ended my naval service, I went to work for a brokerage firm, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner and Smith, and one of the guys I met had gone to MIT, was really into computers, and this was in the mid '80s, and our purchaser lost about 25% of their workforce. That was all state insurance under the Sears. So I'm thinking, okay, well that didn't work out so well. Well, this chap actually happened to be an attorney too, and in talking to him, he said, "Well, you probably would enjoy law school." Went to law school, ended up doing quite well, ended up with a fairly prestigious firm out of Los Angeles called Latham & Watkins, where I did a lot of mergers and acquisitions and a lot of work in that area, some tax work, but it was never really, it was good, it paid well, but the hours were long, and it just didn't really float my boat, if you will. Because I've always had a mathematical sort of bent, and took a look around, decided to go get a doctorate in business, did that, and then the opportunity came up to start a company, and that's how I got started in the business world. And formed a company in 1997, sold it in 2014, and started a couple other small companies, but then always wanted to help out in the data area. So the Department of BioHealth Informatics needed data for their students, and I said, okay, well, I'll help you find data because I have a lot of connections in that world. Had a meeting with the dean. It wasn't even my meeting. I was just an observer. 2 days later, I get an email that says, oh, we have a proposal for you. Proposal? I don't do any consulting with academia. No, we want to make you a professor of practice. Well, what's a professor of practice? Well, we don't know exactly. Well, what does it pay? Well, we don't know. So over a 6-month period, we went through the negotiations, and I finally said yes. I joked that I brought the proposal home, the offer letter to my wife, and she took a look at it and said, wow, that's about a third to a quarter of what you used to make. And I said, yeah. She goes, but the benefits look good. Yeah. And she said, do you have an office would you have an office on campus? Because I've been working at home for 4 years. Yeah. Would you have to go there? Oh, probably every day. Well, you know what? I think this might be a great opportunity.
That's very funny.
So that's how I end up where I am.
That's great. You know, often I see in business meetups, especially when you have a speaker for young entrepreneurial people or young startups, where the young folks are asking advice from the people who have been there, done that. I think they expect to see a well-charted, a well-strategized, a well-thought-through life plan. And I'm sure there are some people who do that. But so many people I've met who have landed in whatever you might call success, so much of that was just putting themselves out there and then letting odd opportunities come to them, and then just having the guts to say yes to something they might not have ever considered.
Well, you know, none of us are born with innate wisdom. None of us come out of the womb just being brilliant about what's going to happen. And I find that people that lock themselves into a business plan, into a life plan, whatever you want to call it, now all of a sudden start, when something new comes up, some new opportunity comes up, won't go after it because it doesn't fit their plan. They want to have everything planned out. Life is not plannable. Just a personal story. Over November of this year, my wife started having some heart issues. So we had to go in the emergency room. They did a scan. They found out she had a lump in her lungs. And the scan said, well, this is cancer. Well, in a moment's notice, every plan that we had for the next 15 years went out the window. Now, the long story is it turned out to be a fungal infection that was very easily treated. But for a 1-month period, while she was in the step down unit for 9 days with high fever and problems with arrhythmia, you know, everything went out the window. And if you can't adjust to those things, now that's a very dramatic example, but those things come up all the time, and you have to be willing to say, yes, I'll take a chance. I'll flip, I'll spin, I'll do what I have to do, because otherwise you'll get locked in, and then you reach, you know, your mid-60s, and you look back on life and you say, man, what have I done? Yeah, I've got a nice 401k. Well, I did until, you know, the last couple months. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I want to have more to life. There's a saying. There's a saying in the motorcycling community, I'm a big motorcyclist, that everybody dies, but not everybody lives. And one of the things I want to do is live. And, you know, when I was practicing law in California, I had a client who, he started Super 8 motels.
Oh, really?
And he declared bankruptcy 8 times, but he was a multimillionaire 9 times. So, you know, you just have to, life hands things to you, got to go with them.
Completely get it. And speaking of hiccups, we're having a little trouble live streaming. So what I'll do is I'll just post our conversation afterwards. But I think in addition to having the kind of guts to live a life, like you say, and say yes to these interesting opportunities, I think it also affords one a perspective that allows you to be a creative problem solver in a way that you might not be able to if you have one particular area of focus. So to go back to a few things you had said before, I was shocked when I first learned about you that you have a PhD in business, and
Yes.
I didn't even know that was possible. And when you clarified it specifically in marketing and market research, one thing that I've done a complete 180 on in the last few years as an engineer and a technical geek myself, I think the merit of a product is the product itself. And that marketing, I used to think was a little bit of glitter you just kind of sprinkle on the turd to sell it. Now I'm exactly the other way around, and I think marketing encapsulates your heartbeat, your vision, who your customer is, who your product is. Even all of that shakes out your strategy. So I'd love for just a couple of minutes to talk about what how marketing can apply to technical folks, because most of the people who will be involved in the 16 Tech Makerspace are probably going to self-identify as techies themselves, maybe startup people, maybe product prototypers or innovators. And like me, I suspect they'll think that marketing is a secondary thing that you could just hire a freelancer to take care of. So I'd love to hear a little of that background and the value it's brought to you, and even how it landed you in data and informatics.
Well, marketing is often confused with advertising or promotion. And that's one component of marketing, but marketing is actually a pretty complex discipline. Because when you start developing a product, even a tech product, you've got to think about multiple things. First of all, the product itself. What is it you're trying to deliver with the product? You hold up a phone. I have a Apple phone. What is it that product delivers? Now, the techie guy will say, well, it delivers a clear voice and a clear video and all of that. The marketing person looks at that and said, yes, but it delivers an experience. It delivers a connection. It delivers something that you don't get otherwise. So the product really is the start. But then the next thing comes up is, what are people willing to pay for that? And how do you communicate the value of what you're getting for what you're paying? So I often, and I shock people about this all the time, when I was growing up, a sign of success was a Rolex watch and a Porsche. I mean, if you got those two things, you thought you were successful. When I talk to young people, their definition of success is the apps they have and the experiences they can have based on this product that was developed. So thinking about what you can deliver and what is that product really good for, not just technically, but what it delivers to people. What is the benefit it gives people? Again, my poor wife, I use her as an example all the time. She used a flip phone up until about 2 years ago. And then we discovered this little program called WhatsApp. And my children and grandchildren, one of my daughters and my grandchildren live in London. Well, now all of a sudden, we could have communication, we could have video, just as easy as being on the telephone using the WhatsApp application. Now she loves her iPhone, because the benefit is now she can see the grandchildren, she can communicate more. It's those things that marketing brings out. And really, marketing is something that should be considered when a product is being designed, because why spend all the time and money developing a product if you don't know whether or not it's going to sell? As part of my business years, well, up until 2014, one of the things we used to do is product development for pharmaceutical products and biotech products. And we had a presence in the Golden Triangle, which is in San Diego. It's a big R&D area for pharma and biotech. And we had people come to us wanting to know what the value of their drug or their compound was. The ones who did that up front and got realistic expectations and learned what they would be able to sell were the ones that were successful. But a number of times, you know, we would do studies, and I always told my customer managers, if it's good news, you deliver it. If it's bad news, I'll come and deliver it, because I'll separate you away from that. And, you know, I'd go in and tell these research scientists, CEOs of these small startup companies, you know, you thought you had $1 billion product. You've probably got a $200 million product, which isn't bad.
Sure.
But it's not, you know, and, you know, invariably they want to throw me out, or, you know, I think I made it to the lobby one time before they brought me back.
Oh, no.
And so let's do that then, so that when we get down the road, we know we have something. Because you're going to spend almost $1 million to get this thing approved. You want to make sure it makes sense to do that. So pricing is a big issue in marketing. And then how do people get the product? This is something that folks don't really think about, but how do you actually get the product into people's hands? And that's another component of marketing is, are you going to build a company and sell it yourself? Are you going to license it out? Or, you know, there are a number of different strategies based on what you want to accomplish with it that come directly from marketing. Quite frankly, when I was going to go back and get the PhD because I worked at a brokerage firm, I thought, oh, I'll get a doctorate in finance. And then I started doing the research and said, wait a minute, this marketing stuff is pretty good. And it uses a lot of statistics. And I like statistics. So why don't I check this one out? And that's how I ended up doing that.
Yeah, I sympathize with the challenge of telling someone who is convinced they have an amazing idea. And it might be an amazing idea, but it might not be a business. And I've had plenty of folks come to my Makerspace and say, I really have this idea. I want to make it happen. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict whether or not it's going to be successful. I have an intuition. And there have been a handful of times where I've felt guilty even taking their time, or if they want to offer some money to help prototype a product, I'll be clear about that. And I've mentioned this phenomenon to other people who run makerspaces, and one of my friends said, yeah, I feel like a dream killer. You know, I just take people's hopes and I dash them, because these are, you know, brain children. They love them. They think it's going to give a new career. It's tough stuff, but I am a techie who likes to put the horse in front of the cart, and that's where I think I'll use the word magic or sorcery of being able to tease out almost like scrying bones or telling the future by properly interpreting big data. And I'm curious if we can use that as a way to parlay into your role in informatics and even in helping people to start companies, because I think part of your original mission was to help, was it mainly biotech startups, but now it's expanded into all sorts of industry?
Well, what I am doing through my work at the university is primarily focused in biotech or health informatics, bioinformatics, health informatics. I do, though, branch out to the remainder of our school, which does things such as virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming is a big component, building decision-making tools in lots of other areas. Most people don't realize it, but we actually offer a master's in science in sports analytics at the School of Informatics and Computing. Now, I haven't developed anything in that area, but information and the ability to analyze information and use it to make predictions, which is predictions that people can use, is really the heart of informatics. And my segue from marketing to informatics was on the research side, because I hate even to think how many studies over the course of almost 20 years I've done in pharmaceuticals And the number of studies that came up short because we couldn't access the data. We got lots of good information, but we couldn't put it in the bigger context that large data would bring. So I started toying around with an idea of creating a company that would then look at existing data that companies had and try to answer questions from that rather than spending money to go collect more data. That was what really segued me into the big data world. Now, big data has a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. And big data has now morphed into terms like artificial intelligence or machine learning, or, you know, there's robotics that come into it. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are involved in there. But essentially what big data means is you take a lot of data and you create an equation or an algorithm, and it's a solution. And then you program it to take that solution, feed it back into that algorithm, and repeat. And you do that over and over and over until it converges or until it gets to a point where you can't improve it anymore. And that's what big data really is. So, and I apologize, my screen keeps popping out here. I'm trying to balance the light here so that, I don't know if you use this joke that I tell people that when you see me on video, wear sunglasses because the glare is blind you.
Join the club for sure.
Yeah. So in creating those algorithms and then applying them to real world situations, now there's all kinds of information you can bring out. And you might think, well, I'm not in pharmaceutical. I'm not in, I design refrigerators, or I design, I don't know, some kind of piece of gear. There's so much data now being collected with smart appliances and smart devices that probably any industry you go into, there is data to analyze to create these kind of algorithms, if you will, to answer questions. And when people move into a makerspace, especially in the tech space, it's incumbent to think about, okay, what kind of data can I collect from this that can help? Either help people, live better lives, whatever it may be, help, whatever that might be, to take that and think about it ahead of time and design that in. Right after I'd sold my company, I was approached by a person that was raising money for an offshoot of a personal oxygen generator, so that people would wear that, and if they needed oxygen, but they could put sensors in that to measure things off of the person's body, get that data, and then send that back to their physician so they could monitor how they're doing. And I pursued that with another gentleman in town who's done a number of venture deals and has taken a couple companies public. And we found out that the market for that did not justify the cost of being able to bring it to market. But the fact that they were thinking about that even then was something that showed that they had good insight, good foresight, because that's the way we're going. Especially, and I'll fall back in my parochial area, healthcare. We have fewer doctors. We're going to have a shortage of doctors. We're going to have a shortage of nurses. We've got an older population. I'm part of the baby boom generation. We're getting older and not as healthy as we used to be. We're going to use a lot more resources. Data is really the way to overcome that. So wearable devices, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, all of those things, there is a whole bunch of innovation going on. And how do we use that data to help improve healthcare? Well, when you look at anything that touches a person, there's an opportunity there for collecting data that can help their health. It's just that we have to think about it up front, because if we try to retrofit it, it will never work. And it gets a lot more expensive than designing it up front. So,
and I love you touched on 3 or 4 hot button topics too, and eventually I'd like to have another conversation at a later date where we can explore things like private licensable data versus open data, privacy versus the value that this brings to me or to the broader community, the definition of improving people's lives or value, or even what I call the purpose of technology. One of its purposes is to make people's lives easier or frankly more fun. They're great on both sides. So we won't stir the hornet's nest up too badly right now by getting into these, but I would like to explore one of your newer ventures, especially as relates to some of the resources that are coming online at the 16 Tech Innovation District shortly. I know you were asking about wet lab space, to do all sorts of research. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you can talk about in that sphere, and then how that might be actually something that the 16 Tech District is offering, not specifically at the Makerspace, which I'll be managing, but it'll be next door at one of the buildings on campus. So let's hear about how you're helping people during these challenging times right now.
Well, we have a researcher in our school who has been doing some pretty cutting edge research on genetics and using genetics for diagnostic purposes. And when the COVID-19, I call it an episode because I don't know if it's an epidemic, pandemic, I don't know what to call it. But when that started rearing its head, he approached me and said, this stuff I've been working on in cancer, in liver disease, and these other things, we can do this with virology, with COVID-19. And so we started pursuing how to be able to bring that to market. Well, this is a real interesting thing, because normally when you're bringing something like this to market, you have a fair amount of lead time. Well, because of the need for more diagnostic tests and the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, people are putting a lot of pressure to get things up and developed and out. So for the last 3 weeks, I think every spare moment I've been working on helping this researcher, and they've formed a company with a person from Atlanta who has some experience in the financing of these sorts of things, helping them figure out how we get this to market. Patent was just filed. There's something called an emergency use authorization for things that the FDA hasn't approved for full-time use. That allows it for use in particular situations. We qualify for one of those. That's going in. We're looking at, we've been talking to manufacturers to put together a prototype of the software that we're going to use for doing this. But one of the things that, and this is an involved process, I'm not going to go into it, but essentially you take a sample of saliva, sputum, a nose swab, you break down the entire genomic sequence for that individual, and then once you have that, you start applying informatics and start testing it to be able to determine all the stuff that's going on with it, all the viruses, all the bacteria, everything. And you pull out then the things specifically related to COVID-19. But it is a time-consuming and expensive proposition. So part of what we're trying to do is find less expensive, more time-effective ways to do this. So we've been talking to manufacturers all around the country, primarily and outside the country. We've been talking, kits. The FDA today approved a at-home test kit. Well, we've just to get the sample, not to actually do the testing, but to get that out, and we're in contact with them to be able to incorporate that into what we're doing. So it's a very dynamic. There are a lot of moving parts. The beauty of this system is that it isn't restricted to just one or two viruses. It takes a look at everything and can come out with a profile for that, which then not only says, okay, you don't have COVID, well, what do I have? Well, we'll have to go back and do more testing. This does it all in one shot. So it's And my role in this is, first of all, handling some of the legal issues and making sure that we have those sorted out. I'm not a practicing attorney in Indiana, but at least I can advise them about who to talk to and where to get that. There's also a big privacy issue, and when they brought me in to teach, privacy and security laws regarding healthcare. So that's I'm able to provide some value there. Then we start talking about the basics of, okay, if we're going to start a company, how are we going to develop a market? How are we going to reach that market? What's the best ways of doing that? I was on a call before joining this, and one of the co-founders said, I've done a lot of startup work, I've done a lot of finance stuff, but this is the first time I've done one where I feel good about it, like I'm helping people, like it's really going to matter. That's as opposed remarkable. To just making a lot of money. And I feel the same way. This is just, what better way to get involved in commercialization, innovation commercialization, than to help people. Well, part of that is we're starting off with a software, a SaaS offering, but the real money is then in developing a full lab that is able to do that and getting it approved. Well, I approached 16 Tech, actually I approached you in 16 Tech about the availability of being able to lease or rent lab space to get this set up and going. And the goal is for us to then have it from collection all the way to outputting it and be able to control that process. Because if we have control over that process, we can optimize it using our data, back to my earlier lesson about informatics, to make it faster and make it more accurate. And that's really what our company is all about. So right now we're just getting started on figuring out how much it would cost to bring this equipment in, and what sort of space is available. And I think that's probably a good 6 months to a year off, because we're really focused now on getting the software analytics in place and making that available to everyone, specifically for COVID-19. Our longer term business plan is that we will get FDA approval for this for all those other diseases, and then we will actually control those and sell those. So pretty aggressive. It's going at about warp speed, and sometimes I think I get up pretty early in the morning. I've worked out my whole life in the morning, because I figure before I wake up and feel pain, I might as well get the workout in, because then it's done and I can go on. So I'll come up and sit at my desk and just start dealing with things. And, it can be, into the evening before I'm done. And I don't even know the time's going, because you're so focused on doing these things. And again, when I was in my 20s and doing this, or in my 30s, it was, oh gosh, I got to be successful. I got to be successful. Yeah. Now it's, I want to make a contribution. I want to be remembered for something more than being that guy with the Porsche and the Rolex. That's so 1980s. Now we're in the 2020s. Let's have a new definition of success.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the reasons I'm energized by conversations with folks like yourself. And one of the things I'm really excited about, having run a Makerspace for a number of years, I've seen a lot of people develop products which are maybe an innovation, maybe a retail product, but it's a pretty narrow pie slice of people who might like to use it. The medical industry, of course, and again, this is top of mind for everyone around the planet right now, is where I think you can make the most impact. And that's always been something outside of my purview, because I've never had wet lab, chemistry lab space at our Makerspace. But by having these facilities available at the 16 Tech campus, again, not strictly in the Makerspace, but across the street on the same campus with our partners, really opens up some amazing opportunities in entire new industries. And again, by having people with different backgrounds, medical backgrounds, big data backgrounds, things you wouldn't think would fit in a Makerspace, I think opens the door to making what is going to happen in Indianapolis in the startup field, in the tech field, in the biosciences field, really singular. And you said something before we had this conversation right now that I didn't have a chance to ask you about. You said when you started one of your earlier businesses, you wished you had had access to a makerspace because you thought it might have saved you some time or treasure.
Yeah, in fact, one of my businesses that I started when I sold my company, like I said, I ride motorcycles. You know, as I'm getting up in years, I've come to the conclusion that if I really want to enjoy an area, I should take my motorcycle on a trailer and then ride around. Well, I did that one year and went out to the Western United States and got stuck in a hailstorm with about, a bunch of other people. And I said, man, you know what I need to do? I need to buy some sort of temporary tent structure that I can put on this trailer to protect my motorcycle, protect everything. If the weather gets bad, I can get in there and hide out. So I built a prototype of it for myself.
Great.
Put it together and then took it back out to this place. And the place I went to was Sturgis. You've probably heard of that. It's a big motorcycle event. Well, I get this thing set up and all of a sudden all these people start coming over and say, man, where'd you buy that? Where'd you get that? I said, well, I built it. Can you make one for me? Can you do that? So I started a company called Flatbed Tents and started manufacturing these things. What I was doing was I was using all things I could buy off the market. So that were, readily purchased and then slapping it together and put it up.
Sure.
So I started thinking about designing my own frame system, my own mounting system, all these things. I don't have any experience with it. I can work on a car. I can work on a motorcycle. I can't fabricate anything. And if I'd had a place where I could have gone and talked to people and said, well, here's my idea. Right now I have these big posts that the tent poles go into. I'd like to countersink that in the ground so that now when somebody ran an off-road Jeep or a piece of construction equipment up onto it, they didn't have to worry about shearing these things off. Well, I asked around and nobody wanted to take that on. Well, if I had a place where I could have done that, taught myself some basic welding and some fabrication, I probably would have kept the company going. I just shut the company down because it was more of a hobby than a business. And, as much as you love something, there comes a time when you say, this is not going to go much further. And I'm done with it. Interesting enough, on my Facebook page, I put a notice that said I'm no longer producing these. And since I've put that up, I've probably gotten more friend requests than the whole time, the whole 5 years I was manufacturing these things. So but yeah, if I could have had a makerspace, the problem with me is if I did have a makerspace, I'd get some idea and then, okay, I'm going to go down there and see if I can put this together. Because I think it's, first of all, it's very intellectually stimulating to think that way. Second, you brought up a point that, you don't know that the medical or the biologic really matches with the makerspace. I would say there's probably a lot of places where those two can come together because scientists and people who are developing these things have a very specific mindset based on their training. They've been doing this for years. They think in those terms. If you bring people with an outside perspective to talk to them, now all of a sudden it kind of opens things up and they can start looking at it in a little bit different way that can help them improve their product. I think that's the value I tend to bring, is because I've had such a broad range of experiences. Somebody can show me something, I can look at it and listen to them and say, well, yeah, that's an idea, but have you ever thought about doing this with it? With my tents, I sold it as storage. That was my, this is a place to keep your stuff safe. I ended up selling most of my tents as camping equipment.
Oh, interesting.
People would go and set these things up and stay in. I sold a number of them to heavy equipment operators who worked on roads, because when they get out on a job site and download their equipment, you have this trailer sitting there. And as one guy told me, lunchtime, my guys are out in the middle of nowhere. They go, sit in the cab of their truck, eat, smoke a little dope, have something to drink, and come back, and they're worthless in the afternoon. If I had a place where we could all go play cards, have a lunchroom, have camaraderie, I'd probably get rid of a lot of that, and I wouldn't have some of the problems I have. And I would never have thought of those ideas, just because that's, I built it, make sure that all this money I spent on this motorcycle didn't get dinged away in a hailstorm. So,
I love that. And typically when, I like to end these conversations on a little point that sells the value of one of these spaces. And I think you just did that. But rather, I know we're coming up, you're a busy guy, so I don't want to take much more of your time. But a few questions I always like to ask our speakers. If someone is interested in starting a business or in bringing a product to market or in connecting with other interesting people, do you have 2 or 3 resources in Indianapolis that people might not know about? And if nothing springs to mind, shoot me a note and I'll put it in the comments of this video so that people start to make benefit of the network of networks that we're putting together here.
The one thing that, well, a couple things. First of all, once you get your Makerspace up, if I believe if you're going to bring a product out, you need to prototype it. The whole design philosophy of prototyping rather than just writing up or drawing or things of that sort. And I think that is key. And when you start doing that, then you start meeting other people with other ideas. And I found that when you get around people who invent, they like to share ideas. I mean, this is a creative process for them. The other thing I would recommend doing is starting out with a small business administration, because they have all kinds of things to help people get companies started. You pay a lot of tax dollars for this. You might as well take advantage of it. Not from the perspective of getting money from them, which you might eventually decide to do, but seeing what they have to help you get started in the process. The other thing I would do is I would start with a very, very extensive search, even with Google, to find out what is there out there that's like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if the market is already taken, yeah, it's a great idea, but if you want to be an entrepreneur, your goal is to make money. Somebody's already got the market. Unless you come up with a completely new way of doing it, go for the low-hanging fruit, I always say. There's lots of it out there. There are a lot of things that need to be done. Go where the money is and where it's easy to get. Don't reach up for that golden apple that's way up there on the top of the tree. Pick those 3 bushels that you can reach and take them over and sell them.
Yeah, I think those are all great bits of advice, and I'll encapsulate them and push them in our comments. So Professor Gary Schwebach, Gary, thank you again so much. Good luck with your startup and with helping folks fight the spread of COVID-19. Good luck with all of your other endeavors, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure, and anytime you're willing to listen to me ramble on about things, I'm willing to come and talk with you. So have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.